You're listening to NTParanormal After Dark. Nothing normal about it.
Hey everybody, how's it going? So last minute change of plans. Sarah was going to be with me on the podcast, and then she wasn't feeling so good, so she jet at the last minute. That's why there's just this blank microphone sitting here. But she couldn't help it. It's okay. So we've been doing pretty good with the podcast, trying to kind of reboot it, get it going again. And I've been trying to pick a new topic every time, try to kind of fill an hour with it, and then really try to interact with you guys on the live chat. Looks like Sarah and Matt are both on here. So is Julie and a few other people who haven't said hi. So if you guys got any questions or anything going on, feel free to heckle me in the comments. I'll try to answer questions, stuff like that. We try to be kind of interactive here. So one of the topics that everybody actually wanted us to kind of discuss, you know, since we're known as the science group, is stone tape theory. Mainly because it sounds like it's an actual thing. I don't know how many of you guys are actually familiar with stone tape theory, but it's one of those things that like every single paranormal group that's out there around the world kind of just throws out there, immediately goes to with like residual hauntings and stuff like that. And it's one that I always find, hey Shannon, how's it going? So for those of you not in the know, of course, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know, so I'm probably just, you know, preaching to the choir here, but stone tape theory, it's the speculation that ghosts and hauntings are just analogs to tape recordings, and that like mental impressions during emotional or traumatic events, they can actually be projected in the form of energy and recorded onto rocks and other bits of like physical matter. And then if the conditions are right, then they can basically like replay themselves like a tape over and over again, right? So the idea of this is that like when you run into a residual haunting, you know, something that's not intelligent, something that's not interacting with you, this stone tape theory says that what it is it's actually like an emotional impression that is actually left on the environment and the matter that's around you. And then when certain things happen, it just kind of replays itself. And, you know, it when I first heard it, it has merit. It has some crazy like flaws with it. You're like 5 steps ahead of me, Matt. You're gonna have to wait. But I mean, it had like some merit in like the thought process sounded like a really logical thing, like they were trying to apply science to, you know, a paranormal event that happened to kind of give it some logic, some reason why things happen a certain way. And then again, it also sounds kind of silly if you know anything about like matter, physics, energy, things like that, which are things that, you know, my group is really heavy into studying. You know, we don't just study the paranormal. We study the physicalities of, you know, like how the mechanics, how the world works, and we're trying to put mechanics to how hauntings work. So this is one of the things that, you know, it's not something we could avoid. We have to look into this and figure out if stone tape theory is actually something that could happen. So when I really started looking at other people's research of stone tape theory, you know, before I started coming to my own conclusions about it and having opinions about it, the concept of it, like at first glance seems really cool, but then you get into the history of it and it ends up kind of convoluted, kind of funny how it came about. And, you know, just because it's got theory kind of stuck at the end of it, it sounds all like an actual scientific theory. Yeah, Sarah, if you're feeling better, you can come back in. But I think Sarah's going to come back. She just threw me a message. Sorry, that threw me off a little bit. Hopefully she comes back in here in a second and starts heckling me. Wouldn't movement of matter in the environment affect that, like removal of a rock? Yes, absolutely. That's one of the things that they think actually could be like a trigger for these events, is like when you actually disturb the matter or change its configuration, it can actually like release the energy. But the way the theory actually kind of started is its foundations were originally rooted by like the three people that I actually have up here right now. That would be Charles Babbage, which he was an engineer. They call him the father of computer technology. He published a work on natural theology called the Ninth Bridgewater Treatise. Babbage speculated that spoken words leave permanent impressions in the air, even though they become inaudible after time. He suggested that it's possible due to the transfer of motion between particles. So he was basically saying that like spoken word is energy, and once it's put out there, that energy is always out there. It can bounce around, but eventually it's gonna lose that kinetic force and no longer work. The next person that this is kind of based off of is Eleanor Sidgwick and Edmund Gurney. They were both part of SPR, which is Society of I can barely say it, Society for Psychical Research. Anyway, they presented views about how certain buildings and materials being capable of storing records of past events, which can be later, be played back. But they were initially talking about like gifted individuals. Oh my God, I'm getting a message from someone. Jeez.
Give me my headphones back. I'm better.
Give me. So what they were talking about was that, since you just came in and interrupted the show, why don't you take it over for a second while I replug myself back in?
Where were you?
I was talking about how... There we go. Okay. I get back to what I was...
That was so much effort.
I know, shut up. I was talking about Eleanor Sidgwick, right? So she was this psychic medium that was part of this group, right? And she kind of put forth the idea that an environment could store energy and it could be replayed, but you had to be psychic to be able to see the replay, sort of thing. So that's kind of how it started. So none of them really put out the stone tape theory like as stone tape theory, but that's kind of what started it. Those three people, Babbage, Eleanor, and Edmund, started that. And then it from there it kind of evolves, right? In 1968, this guy T.C. Lethbridge, right? He would take T.C. Lethbridge, this guy here. Y'all are throwing me so off my game. Okay, so this guy
did it on purpose.
T.C. Lethbridge. This guy was a legit archaeologist, and he studied. And I just looked straight at you, which I told you I wasn't going to do. So, T.C. Lethbridge, he was this archaeologist that he was he did his thing for Cambridge University, right? Which is really prestigious. But he almost got kicked out of the. He almost got kicked out of the group entirely, because he was actually doing like these digs, and he was purposefully misidentifying certain things to get to the conclusions he wanted to get to, because he was trying to write this paper about like pre-human civilization, things like that. So it really put a damper on his credibility. So eventually he got fed up with that and decided, okay, well, I'm just going to be a parapsychologist now. And what Lethbridge did is he did all these different studies, and they all kind of related back to his archaeological field. But he ended up writing this book. Anyway, Lethbridge claimed that past events can be stored in objects thanks to fields of energy that he believes surrounded streams, forests, mountains. His 1961 book, Ghosts and Ghouls, popularized these ideas, which allegedly could have inspired the movie, which we're about to talk about. So he didn't actually so even this other guy, this scientist, this researcher, also didn't put forth the stone tape theory. So of all these like 4 people that could possibly be legit, that were possibly practicing science and might work out the mechanics of all this, they kind of had some ideas in place that were kind of really heavily borrowed on for stone tape theory, but none of them actually put forth stone tape theory, right? So where does it come from, right? So a year after Lethbridge dies in 1970, in 1971, the BBC put out this great movie called The Stone Tape, and it's we actually watched it the other. What'd you think of it?
I think it was made in the 70s.
Yeah, it's like
I fell asleep 45 minutes into it.
Right. So what the movie's about is they're renovating this castle, and they're putting in they're doing like all these electrical experiments and stuff inside, because it's like a power company that's doing it. They're making technology. And there's this one room of the castle where this event just like happens over and over again. And these scientists that are inside the castle come to the conclusion that the stone walls actually absorb the thermal energy, audio energy, emotional energy of everybody. And it replays itself, and it causes this like paranormal sort of happening, this haunting. And it's yeah, I mean, it was pretty critically acclaimed for what it was. It actually wasn't a movie, it was a teleplay, which is, you know, what they do in the movies. So I think a lot of it was like live, maybe. And it doesn't hold, the story's pretty cool, but it doesn't hold up really well. But that is actually where stone tape theory like really grabs hold and gets its origins and its name. And actually most of the science that gets quoted, like when you're seeing other paranormal groups and they're talking about stone tape theory and how it could work and things like that, they're actually quoting the science from this fictional movie, or it's a book too. But that's actually where they're pulling like all those facts from. A lot of the stuff that research for the fictional thing was based on was pulled from people that were actually doing some kind of research, you know, however credible they were. But the things that current investigators are actually quoting from, you know, the theory, and they're talking about the science and the things like that, it actually comes from this horror movie from 1971. It's kind of like the EMF thing. Like nobody was. There were only a few people doing EMF research in the paranormal field, and then Ghostbusters hit in the 80s, and they had the EKG meter or whatever, and then all of a sudden everybody was out there with like tri-field meters and things like that. What about the theory that sound was captured by potters using brushes on clay pots? I thought that was called stone tape theory too. No, I think that's more related to Rodave's work. Who did a lot of the EVP sort of thing. I'm not sure, that part didn't actually show up in any of my research. So this movie's kind of what made it popular with like the general public, and then all of a sudden you get the paranormal investigators out there, and then they catch on to it. And I don't want to say just because it's kind of based on a fictional thing that it doesn't have any merit. Like it could still have merit. There's a lot of things that started in science fiction that ended up becoming real, you know, like your phone, you know, Star Trek, things like that. So I don't want to crap on it just because that's what the inspiration of it was a fictional thing. But I find it kind of funny that when you're trying to have a serious conversation about it with people, they're quoting science from a science fiction movie from the 70s, no less. Like they're using these like crystal devices, and they got reel-to-reel tapes on the walls and things like that. And it's
like quoting the ghost hunters from Poltergeist.
Yeah, but I do that all the time.
Well,
because they were right.
That's because you're not legitimate.
That's true. So, but as far as okay, so the basis of it's not legitimate, but okay, so putting all that aside, let's say this is like a thing, right? And it's something we study and we check out, right? So let's look at our personal studies, right? So During our investigations, we pretty much classify everything under two big categories. And that's going to be like intelligent in course, like, 90% of our cases, we don't find legitimate activity, right?
Anything.
But there's that 10% that's left. So if you look at the numbers in that 10% of everything that we're looking at, like 70% of that falls into the category of residual. The other 20%, it falls under intelligent, meaning that it like actually responds to us, answers questions, seems like it gives a crap that we're there. Residual, meaning it's more like a recording, like what we're talking about right now. I mean, would you agree? I haven't actually ran the numbers on it, but it seems like when we find activity, like it doesn't matter if we're there or not infecting the environment.
It depends on if you're listening to the people that call us out there or not and taking what they say at actual value. Because pretty much anyone who says my house is haunted seems to think it reacts to them. And just because it's not doing it while we're there doesn't mean it doesn't do it.
Well, I'm just talking about from activity that we actually capture. It like, because we'll ask we get EVPs all the time and we ask questions, but
the answers are random.
Yeah, it may as well be ordering the moons over my hammy at Denny's. It's like it's cool that we got an EVP, but it's doesn't really seem to be a direct response to what we specifically asked.
Yeah, it goes like this: "What's your name?" "Get out."
Yeah,
that wasn't the question.
So, if we actually classify that as activity, we would classify it as residual, right? So that would fall under stone tape theory. Those would be the ones we'd be like, okay, is something actually trapping the energy? So, Lethbridge. So, yeah. So these would be some of our, like that I would classify as like a residual haunting when I was at the Lancaster warehouse. Because it didn't really seem to respond to anything I was doing. It was just completely random stuff like that. And this one, just kind of caught by accident.
I don't know if you're going to talk about Great House, because I've been out there a couple of times more than like years before we were a group, and I wouldn't call that residual.
Well, what did it do that was like a
I don't know,
response
but that's a
to
creepy meth head kid. I've already decided. It's a baby Bigfoot.
Do I believe in haunted objects? I don't know that I do, just because I haven't actually run across anything where activity actually seemed to follow a specific object around. But if there was a haunted object or something where we could get some kind of measurable activity,
mail it to us.
Yeah, first off, mail it to us. And then if we did get something, then it would kind of be a plausible version of stone tape theory, even though it's not stone. But,
well, yeah, the question would be if that is a thing and you haul the rocks somewhere else, does it move?
Well, and that's what somebody kind of asked before is like, does changing the physical properties of the environment actually change the stone tape theory? And it's kind of adaptable. A lot of people, hey, you're such a smart ass. Do you actually do anything or other than just, make weird comments, Matt?
I want a haunted pet rock.
I want a haunted pet rock too. I'm just mad that I didn't think about it. Okay. But, I wonder if you could force a residual moment, like a recorded time slip. Well, that's kind of the idea that people want to test with the whole stone tape theory thing, because they're like, okay, if it's a recording and it happens at a certain time of day with a certain temperature going on and all these certain conditions, can we replicate the conditions and make the thing happen? And the thing is nobody has actually been able to do that. So that's definitely one of the nails in the coffin of stone tape theory, is that nobody can actually figure out like what these actual parameters are to kind of unlock it and make it happen. Like nobody's been able to just forcibly make it happen. Not psychics, not scientists, not anybody. And, from the scientific angle, there's no evidence that stone itself actually holds any kind of energy. Because the big thinking point is, graveyards are haunted because you have all the headstones out there. Castles are haunted because you have all the stone around it, and it holds that energy. Well, the thing is they've and I don't know why any legitimate scientist would have took time to do this, but they did do studies, and it turns out that stone does not hold energy at all. It doesn't even hold thermal energy that well. Like, as soon as the sun goes down and you're actually measuring the thermal energy of the rock, it's immediately dissipating. Like, it doesn't hold any of it. So the idea that stone is holding some type of energy is kind of off base, but that's taking stone tape theory, in the literal sense, which is what you're supposed to do. But, I think people are smart enough to kind of think outside of the box, and are like, okay, so maybe it's not stone, maybe it's this other thing. So I was kind of trying to think about what would actually hold some kind of energy. And that would actually be crystals, which Matt talked about. I've never done an investigation when things happen when someone says it happens.
Like when you take people on a ghost hunt and they're like, why isn't anything happening yet? Jump, ghost, jump, do something. Yeah, that doesn't work.
Yeah, nothing ever seems to happen on command, hardly ever. A lot of it seems to be by chance. But then, there's, like when we went out to Denton, and they're like, oh, if you go out there at 3 a.m., that's when the goat man appears, or things like that. And then you go out at that specific time, and it never happens. Or we tried doing that out at Kyle a lot, where we're like, okay, maybe it has to do with the phases of the moon, right? And so we did that a lot at Kyle. That was really our testing of stone tape theory, because the dimensions of the place seemed to change. The place didn't always seem the same every time we went, so we were really going a lot to try to figure out what the key combination of, like, environment, of emotional state, things like that were, because we were basically basing it off this kind of theory, this stone tape theory, which is a really horrible name for it. But I mean, you agree, right?
Sure.
That is what we were testing out all those times, right?
I was just thinking, hey, we've done this during these circumstances. Let's go back and do it during the same circumstances. I don't think back then I knew there was an actual theory we were working off of. Oh.
Why is it always 3 a.m.? That is because stupid ghosts don't respect freaking time zones.
But, yeah, and if you're a ghost and you live in Arizona, isn't that the state that doesn't do daylight savings?
Well, they should. Ghosts would probably be really cranky in Arizona if that was the case.
And are they in Mountain Time, Central Time?
I don't know. Oh. Time's a construct anyway. But anyway, if we're talking about inanimate objects that can actually hold data, and Matt was actually talking about this earlier, what about crystals? Because he was, jumping 10 steps ahead. Crystals actually can store data. We actually use them now. We actually use crystal technology in current computing. The way it works is actually pretty cool, because like I'd always heard that, but I didn't really understand it. It's kind of outside my thing. But I looked into how that works, and I was actually really impressed by it, because the way it happens is it's through photons, light, right? So when light hits a rock, it absorbs the heat for just a little bit, or it just straight bounces off. But when it hits a crystal, photons actually penetrate a crystal, but the properties of a crystal are such that it actually slows down the photons, and depending on the type of crystal it is, in different properties of it, like especially quartz, it can actually slow down photons to the point of no molecular movement until the point that it's released. And we've actually figured out ways to like engineer where we bombard it with like photonic particles, slow them down inside, and then we can release them at a time of our choosing. So we can actually use crystals as like memory chips. So the thing about it is a crystal is not a stone, obviously, but it is a natural element that's out there. that is incorporated into a lot of locations. So if you think of it in those terms, there are actually materials out there that can absorb types of energy, and this could be potentially your culprit, especially like if you have like crystal that's, because it's found in the ground and in rocks and stuff like that. So if it's ground up with everything else, it could be in the stone. So it's not actually the stone, it would be the crystal in there.
Headstones often have crystals in them.
Really?
Yeah. You go out to a cemetery, like you'll shine your headlights on it, and
I thought that was just because it was limestone.
it'll have other stuff in it sometimes, especially the older ones.
Well, nobody told me that. I don't know anything about headstones.
Obviously.
I don't like you. So potentially crystals could... okay, so they can store photons, and they can slow photons down to the point of no molecular movement. Could that possibly make ghosts? I don't know. If you think ghosts or spirits or apparitions are made of photons, then possibly. And then under certain conditions, it could actually like replay or release that data. So I think, yeah, maybe in that sense there could actually be a possibility. There's a lot of data out there that kind of supports the idea that different types of light, different types of crystal combinations, things like that, will actually produce different results. And so if you're just talking about totally randomness, there's a... By the way, I live in Arizona, and it gets as good evidence in the day as I do at night. Man, I find most our best evidence is actually during the day when we're not looking for it. I mean, one of the big reasons we even do anything at night is basically for light control experiments, and to cut down like on traffic, foot traffic, actual traffic, things like that.
Working around day jobs and having kids and all that stuff. But during the day we get just as much, if not more.
I think like half of our good evidence that we actually present is actually shots that we took, like just doing the daytime shots, like not actually investigating. So
watched pot never boils. Isn't that the old adage? You got to be not looking for it to happen.
Yeah, it's the more we go looking for trouble, the less trouble we usually find. Is kind of the thing. But I don't know. So, like, if you were specifically talking about crystals, though, I think that crystals have the potential for it, but I don't think... But crystals are everywhere. I think the phenomenon would be more, like, prevalent. Like, we would just constantly have these, like, replays all the time.
Yeah, yes, if we've ever gone on an investigation and had the same things happen over and over at the same time, except for that warehouse that none of us got to go in because that was before we were doing this, I don't think we have.
Well, the thing about... So I had, like, repeating phenomenon at the warehouse, but it wasn't always, like, the same times. It was the same things, but it seemed random in placement.
Well, rocks can't tell time, so it'd have to be condition-based as opposed
you don't
to
know
time-based.
That sounds prejudiced to me.
If the rock pulls out a pocket watch, like now, no, that doesn't happen.
So we're talking about this theory that like bases all the way back to like some sketchy research in the first place. Actually, only 1 out of the 4 people actually was even credible at all, and it was a very, very early science. Like it was like 1801 is when he started his research, and the only reason I even call him credible is he wasn't a parapsychologist. He was an engineer. He was inventing ways to store data in new ways. The other ones were kind of sketchy, and then this movie comes out, and then all this evidence and science that's quoted is from, this 1971 teledrama. And so it's the foundations of it are kind of shaky, but I think there's kind of merit to the idea, because I prefer the idea of residual hauntings to intelligent hauntings. Like I never really feel like there's people walking around being ghosts. I feel like we're just seeing, like, most of the time we're seeing replays of stuff. Anytime we run into something intelligent, it never actually seems like it's something human to me. In sometimes it communicates in a human way, but it always seems like it's like impersonating a human or like trying to be tricky or something.
There's obviously only one way to test this. We need a stone room and a victim.
But okay, so they've done that and
They've killed people in stone rooms in order to record a haunting.
Oh, and that's another thing that came up with like the stone tape theory is like, okay, if people are like sacrificed on the rocks or whatever, that's what creates some of the paranormal activity because it absorbs the trauma and things like that.
Then you think the oubliette in the Tower of London would be uber haunted?
They are.
Supposedly.
Those are supposedly some of the most haunted places like in the world. Yeah, castles in Ireland.
Well, if anyone would like to send airfare.
Yeah, we're on a shoestring budget. Like we're scraping together money for an EEG right now.
But victims are free.
Right. So I'm not the only, so like while I think there's merit to it, like I don't want to totally like just shut the door on it because the way it stands, like if you go look it up on Wikipedia and you just read it word for word and you go by that, the way it stands, it's bullcrap. It's shoddy science. It's pseudoscience at best.
Oh, this is pseudoscience.
And I know all of it's pseudoscience, but this is especially pseudoscience. And this particular one really kind of angers me because they stick the word theory at the end of it to make it sound more sciencey, so that it sounds like more research was put into it than
at
what.
Best, it's a hypothesis.
It's not even that. It's like some dude was like high and was like, you know what I think ghosts are? It's just a VHS recording, man. You know, and so it, as it's written, it's total bullcrap in my mind. But I think there's some merit in the idea that some paranormal activity is actually just like a non-intelligent residual replay. Like that makes sense to me because we've captured evidence of that sort of activity. So what kind of causes that is kind of up for question. If you're thinking it has to do with energy, you know, and the release of energy to make it replay and things like that, then I think like the direction you need to look is other materials besides stone or trees and rivers and all these ridiculous things that don't actually hold data, but like crystals do. So I'd like to see I'd like to see some actual research kind of like go in that direction. So some of the in like other people have had the same kind of thought process as me. There's this book called How to Think About Weird Things, Critical Thinking for a New Age by Theodore Schick and Lewis Vaughn. They dismiss the whole thing as irrational, saying that the problem is we know of no mechanism that could record such information in a stone or play it back. Chunks of stone do not have the same properties as reels of tape. So one of the things I looked up on, okay, so like if you're the next logical mode of thought is like, okay, so you're looking at things that can record. What could possibly do this? I mean, we use tape, or we did use tape till we went to CDs and things like that, right? The properties of tape are like magnetic. So there could actually be possibly, I don't know, I'm kind of stringing together thought at this point, but you kind of see where I'm going with it.
I was reading the comments.
What's the comment?
I was saying, so you think crystal could be used instead of an EMF pump? But you'd have to have a chart, like it'd have to already have like a murder or two under its belt for it to work.
Yeah, that would make sense. Like, there's this other group that we've seen. I'm not gonna call them out.
It murders people.
No, they don't murder people. But that would be a cool book. They murder people and then do paranormal investigations about it.
Why would you say that out loud?
I don't know. No, but they use an amplifier and they glue a bunch of crystals to the front of it to amplify
Do you
the.
think they've murdered someone for every one of those crystals?
Yes,
That's genius.
that would be genius, and that might make it better.
Metal.
I don't think just regular run of the mill crystal would actually work because it's not like charged basically. But if there was a way you could charge the crystal, like with you're way too lazy to write a book. I know you.
No, it's my idea.
I don't know if you could charge a crystal with photonic light, like intentionally somehow,
And then take it with you, and
and take it with you, and then release the energy. Maybe it would work better than an EMF pump, or maybe if there's a material that can actually store EMF instead of just like exuding it.
Well,
Something
Julie
like that.
said metal. So like with metal with magnetic properties work like crystal.
He says hook it to a battery charger. I mean, I guess so, but I would have to look. I don't think crystals are conductive. Like not in that manner. I know you can run a circuit through a crystal, but I think you would. I don't know that the crystal would actually take an electrical charge because it doesn't hold it. The only reason it holds photons is because of the properties of the atoms. The way crystals are formed, different than stone, is that with stone the atoms are highly dense, but they're in a random pattern. In crystals, what makes a crystal and not a stone is the fact that the atoms are in a repeating pattern, like they're identical in the way they stack up. That's what gives them that like level of clarity. So like the cloudier a crystal is, the more the atoms have diverged from their ability to line up perfectly and replicate. I'm explaining that really bad, but metal tape for the recording they used to have, I would have some
So like I said, if it's metal and it has magnetic properties, would that work?
I think we should bring in back on this. No, I'm not talking to Zach Baggins about anything, period, whatsoever. I wouldn't even ask him where the best place to buy tacos is. I don't know, but crystals were just one idea. I mean, I don't know, like you see psychics and stuff like that use crystals a lot, which kind of turns me off to trying to use them for any application in scientific paranormal investigation. But I would be open to the idea of like I already used one of your germanium diodes for EVP recording. The interesting thing is I haven't got a single EVP on that piece of equipment yet. I know other people have, but we have not. Which actually, in my mind, kind of solidifies it as a more like reputable piece of equipment, actually, because it doesn't just like churn out results like using a phone app or something like that. So one of the other things I looked up, one of the other people that did research is Sharon Hill. She's a geologist. She claims that stone tape. And this is basically what I was saying earlier. I was basically quoting her because I agree. Stone tape theory is a misleading term. It suggests to encompass structure, credibility, and explanatory power of the scientific theory, while in reality, it's speculation that lacks any physical basis. According to her, it's an attempt to present a pseudoscientific claim in a seemingly scientific style. Psychometry. That's the other name for stone. That's the preceding theory before stone tape theory. So it's kind of.
I don't think I've ever heard that before.
Okay, so what psychometry is, which, God, I can't believe I'm saying this, which actually has more merit, mainly because it gets further away from science. Like I think paranormal theories actually have more merit sometimes the further they get away from science because they're less likely to be incorrect. Like stone tape theory, they're like, oh, the science of this and this and this, but it's incorrect science. Like there's
So don't even claim it's science.
Right, yeah, they're intentionally manipulating facts. With psychometry, it being more, they're talking, what they talk about is not the objects that are in the room, but it's like, so you kind of know what dark matter, or like, it would be the negative space in between all objects and stuff, right? It would be the psychic energy that is like the conduit between everything. So pretend there's like this psychic goo that's invisible or whatever, and that is the actual thing that absorbs energy, and that can stick to objects. And so it's not really the object that has the absorbative property, it's the psychometric juices.
So can you wash that off?
I don't know. Bill Murray did in Ghostbusters when he got slimed.
Just bleach it.
I mean, it's akin to ectoplasm. I mean, if you think about this like psychic energy that just kind of encompasses all matter, blah 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 blah. You know, it's basically like dark matter. And so now we're talking about this like this invisible psychic. Jizz. It's on the tip of my tongue, you know. And,
yeah, it is.
Oh God. But like, I hate that has more merit than the idea that stone can hold and release energy, because but it's like, it makes more sense because at least it's not something I can prove wrong. You know, I can tell you stone doesn't hold, it doesn't, and thermal energy is like the basic. Gravity and thermal dynamics are the two forms of energy like you can't dispute and they do not hold ghost jizz. But
I think that's exactly what you said, though.
I don't know. No, but I'm saying that there's invisible magic ghost jizz just in the air all the time, and it's this magical ghost jizz that everything just, you know, sticks to because it's really sticky.
You're the one that said that was more valid than stone tape theory. You're digging your own hole here.
I don't know.
We could probably put that in jars and sell it on eBay. People sell boxes of nothing on eBay, so why not?
That's psychometry. Psychometry is the study of ghost jizz. But
science.
It's the opposite of science. But yeah, psychometry, that was what was actually put forth by the Edmund and what's her face?
Who?
Oh God, Eleanor, Edmund and Eleanor. They were real big into psychometry.
Is that the Waroses?
They're the ones that were part of that like original paranormal group, like in the 1800s.
Oh no, before that, like not the demon people.
Right. Yes, you're talking about like the Hills Society or whatever. I think I know what you're talking about.
Psychics that are supposedly able to hold an object and tell you where it came from, and
yes, but that's part of psychometry. They're supposed to be able to unlock the like psychic properties of objects and things like that, but it's through the conduit of ghost jizz.
I'm an X-Files fanatic, and there's this one episode where he goes in and like gives this object to the psychic, and the psychic starts listing off all this bullshit, and he's like, "Nope, just got that this morning," and just leaves because that's how valid that is.
Oh. It's like holding a bracelet Ashton wears all the time and being
awesome.
able to get a reading from the residual energies left on it. I guess so.
Well, yeah, it's like people will take their dead spouse's wedding ring to these people and they'll have them hold it, and like that's supposed to link it, and they're supposed to be able to tell the history based on the object. Like, oh, these keys were used in a murder, hold them and tell me who did it.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I was talking about the Warrens. That's who I was talking about.
Oh, no, not the Warrens. These were the Society for Psychical Research. It was Edmund Gurney and Eleanor Sidwick. They're the ones that really were...
Yeah, I'm stuck on Hellfire Club people, too, though. I don't know what you were talking about.
Hellfire Club? They're pretty famous. They were over in Europe, and they
Obviously
used to do, like...
not that famous.
Are you fucking out of your mind? They used to like sacrifice people and have orgies and all kinds of weird shit.
At the same time?
Yes.
Oh.
You would have fit in.
I did not say I was going to kill anyone. I just said it would be the best scientific way to go about it is to have a stone room with some quartz or something and to murder a bunch of people in the room.
So murder a bunch of people in a stone room with quartz and have an orgy. We'll call it the Hellfire Club.
I never said orgy. You threw that in.
But we're talking about ghost jizz.
You were talking about ghost jizz.
You can't have an orgy without ghost jizz. Not a paranormal orgy, anyway.
Okay, well. Who was it that had sex with a ghost? Keisha? K$.
Kesha. Terry wants to go to that party. We're not. Okay. But
I'll video and stay far away. I'll hand out wet naps.
sounds just horrible.
Maybe your standards are low, and it would be awesome.
But anyway, what time? We started 5:30. Okay.
It's been 47 minutes.
Yeah, I got about 15 minutes left to fill. So at the basis of it, Stone Tape Theory is saying that objects. Hey, Terry likes you. We all do. She's the only one with any common sense out of us. Oh, see, I was going to introduce her at the beginning of the episode, but she was yakking, so she was in the other room throwing up, and it got time to start. So I started. How you feeling now, by the way?
I'm okay.
Are you good?
Yeah. Have I puked on you yet?
It would be awesome. I told you if you did have to puke, you should do it on the podcast because it would be the best episode. Oh, so this is Sarah Hatfield. She is the one of the other founders of NTParanormal. She was actually doing paranormal investigation before I came along and started doing paranormal investigation. We just happened to be friends around the time that...
If by paranormal investigation, you mean walking around with a tape recorder in a cemetery asking if ghosts fart.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that you used to do it for recreation.
Yeah.
I would call it ghost hunting at that point. But you were, in all fairness, doing it before me. But we just happened to be friends like around the time that I had that first experience. Yeah. Because I was dating Allie at the time. You're Allie's best friend, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Drink anything with ginger. That's a good idea. I need ginger ale.
Oh, yeah. We can go get ginger ale after this. But yeah, I was dating Allie at the time, and Allie was working these really crazy hours or whatever, and I'd had my experience, and I was like, oh, shit, I want to go do this. And
yeah, because me and Allie had been out together
right.
before. Hey, cat.
And so that's why me and you kind of started the whole thing. Like in the beginning, it was just me and you with a recorder going. Well, as far as NTParanormal was concerned, it was you and Allie before me. But then me and you started doing it seriously.
Yeah, because we weren't when me and her were doing it, we had not even a digital recorder. We had an old school with one of the little tape cassettes in it recorder.
That's part of our kit. Yeah, we still have it.
Old school.
I think all I added to it is at first is I owned a video recorder.
Yeah, video cameras and the knowledge base.
Yeah, I was already doing audio engineering. I had really good mics like we're using right now, things like that. And I had seen 2 or 3 episodes of Ghost Adventures or whatever. So we're like, oh, we could do this.
So you watch Ghost Adventures. I like the Taps people. That was my.
Well, I watched that too.
I never watched Ghost Adventures until you.
It's so horrible. I love watching him fail at life, but it's so horrible. But yeah, that's how we kind of got together, and so we're kind of the founders. But then man, it wasn't 5 investigations in that Allie started going with us every single time.
And she wanted to go, but she was working a job where she was literally working all night.
Yeah,
and she couldn't. And then after her,
that's why I always say NTParanormal is really we're the 3 co-founders. We're the ones that started it, and then we've added and subtracted team members since then.
And a lot of people would like to go with us every time and are members, but they can't. So,
yeah. Well, like your dad, he goes on every second or third investigation whenever he can show up. Kristen can't make every single one of them. Watching him fail. Yes, Ghost Adventures is horrible, but I still love it. I think it's funny to listen to them talk to ghosts. I always loved Ghost Adventures because I always felt like the only reason Zach Baggins was working out was so he could physically beat up the ghost when it fucked his girlfriend. He's like, what are you doing, bro? I'm going to fuck you up, man. He always looked like... Because if you watch, the very first episodes of Ghost Adventures, he's this skinny nerd. He looks like me in high school, right? And then it gets, to the second season. All of a sudden, he's, bulked up, real big. You can tell all he does is just bench press, read porn, and play with an EMF detector, and he's like, I'm gonna beat up the ghosts, brah. yeah, and I'm not gonna get any ghost jizz in my hair when I do it.
Well,
Like,
then how would he style his hair?
I don't know.
I've only watched like 3 episodes with you, and that's it. Like I said, I like the Ghost Hunters group, and
So at least in the first couple of seasons, they seem to take a more legitimate approach to it. I liked that part of it. It seems like as soon as like their shows take off or whatever, man, it's all about ratings, and it becomes a reality show. Like, you end up with all
if
this
they
weird.
offer me money for this, I'm selling out so fast.
I mean, I can't really deny it either. I would probably write a book as like my cutoff point or something. Be like, all right, this is the last credible research I did. Now just give me your money after this. But I don't know. I really think like you and Allie are the two legitimate investigators. My only job is to keep the science part of it in check, to be like, no, let's not jump to that conclusion there. You know, there's this little bit we forgot to do to basically like pick it apart.
I think my dad thinks you're around to keep me from wandering off into the woods by myself.
That is almost my sole job, just to keep you from dying. With your best 1-900 voice and heel pop.
What they're talking about? They're making lewd comments about ghosts.
Oh, okay.
For
Hi.
shame.
Hi, you've reached the Ghost Jizz hotline. If you'd like to talk to some hot ghosts, press 1. No?
I'm not playing this game. No. Meanwhile, my mom's at home watching this and crying with shame.
Your mom's proud of you for for all your achievements in the paranormal fields. Just like my mom is. She's like, I'm so proud of you. I'm like, I just wander around cemeteries at night and I say horrible things to dead people.
Well, that's really the only thing I bring to this is my extensive career in wandering around cemeteries.
Yeah. So if you want to do more reading about, like, so I only really barely scratched the surface of like what stone tape theory is. I mean, basically where I was going with it is like my conclusions are like, as it's written, as it's known, as it's popularly quoted, it's garbage. There's no scientific backing to show that stone and in other similar materials actually hold energy or could release energy only if certain conditions are met. But there are other elements in physical materials that do have those properties. I mean, that's how computers operate, and things like that. In like I was saying with crystal, you know, it can store light basically, like indefinitely. And the thing is we're utilizing that more now. That's called fiber optics. That's, you know, that's how most data connections are run now, and it's way more efficient. And so that's actually through moving data through light. So in theory, crystals can release energy and release data. Can it do it in like a visual or audio format without the interpretation of like a computer or hardware? That remains to be seen. Oh, but that does bring up a good point, right? So basically, if you're thinking of crystals in that respect, or silicon or things like that in that respect, that it can hold and move data, and like we're looking at a computer screen right now and we're transmitting our voice and things like that. So you can get audio and visual from it, but it has to be interpreted through hardware. Maybe not seeing like a haunting with your own eyes is necessarily stone tape theory, but when we get like those random responses on our recorders, that could be because that's hardware interpreting that data. Or when we get something on like a video recorder, that's our hardware interpreting that optical data. So that kind of makes sense in my head. So I think there's still kind of like an argument for it, but there's definitely no science there. Like,
just as a side note, that's the super boring version of ghost hunting. I prefer the one where at any moment I'm going to be randomly murdered by a ghost. This whole residual voice thing does nothing for me.
I mean, yeah, it is less exciting, but it would be something where like you could always depend on it being there and go find it or whatever. But so if you guys want to do like some of your own reading on it and actually get some useful information out of it, there was a book written in 2002 by Tony Cornell called Investigating the Paranormal that talks about stone tape theory in even more depth than I was talking about. In 1985, there was a book called The Skeptic's Handbook of Parapsychology by Paul Kurtz. And then T.C. Lethbridge, one of the guys that's basically credited as like the pioneer of it, even though he didn't actually call it stone tape theory. That was called Ghost and Ghoul. And then William Denton wrote The Soul of Things, or Psychometric Researches and Discoveries. It's too long of a title to actually be a good read, in my opinion. But yeah, if you guys want to check out more stuff on actual stone tape theory, those would be the places to check out. And you know, just do a Google search. I'm sure you'll find a bunch of things. And then if you're feeling up to it and you like older movies, like I don't think it holds up real well, but you can actually watch the stone tape on YouTube. Like it's that old.
The graphics do not hold up at all. It's brutal.
Okay, like, see, I'm an old video gamer. Like, I still like Donkey Kong, so graphics don't bother me.
What about firing a blazer into a crystal and bouncing it back into a receiver? I'm going to ignore that. Typo correct, it's blazer.
Laser, not blazer.
It's blazer.
Laser blazer.
Heat runs Bartertown? Oh, that's Master Blasters.
Yeah. What about firing a laser into a crystal and bouncing it back into the receiver? Yes. I actually thought about that. Hold on a second. So that's what they're doing in this picture. They're actually firing a laser into it. So they're filling it with they're basically running photonic ions through the crystal. And then it, like, as you can see, it comes out on the other side, but a certain amount of them are actually trapped. So you could actually do some experiments with that if you used a prismatic crystal, like something that was cut so that it's actually separating out the photons. And yeah, I guess you could aim the beam into a piece of equipment and take readings on it and see if those readings differ from the readings going into the crystal. Would be a good experiment. But then you would, I guess, ask for the spirits or whatever to try to manipulate it and then see if it changes at all. But I think the problem with it is you're actually trying to test a residual haunting, so it would not respond to your requests. So I think that would be tough because any data that you received would be random.
Yeah, it proves nothing about life after death or spirit attacks or anything like that. Yeah, it'd have to be a whole separate class of haunting, just something else.
Yeah, and that's that's exactly like what I was going with. Is it's not a life after death thing. It's basically just a recording of trauma that happened, or not even trauma, just somebody wandering around. So it's not proof of life after death. That's why I can wrap my head around it a little bit better. Like if I could actually get some kind of proof that was actually what was going on, then there would be like some kind of causality to it. And it doesn't involve me having to get into like spirituality or life after death.
You don't have to believe anything.
Right. Yeah. It's like, okay, there's a phenomenon out there that happens and it's legitimate. And it just turns out it's just this other natural thing that is actually explained. And I mean, there's stuff for the like consciousness after death where you can get into it after you understand it more. But that one is just so much more simpler to grasp. Sound travels through lasers, though. Yes, it does, Matt.
We should do a podcast on what is considered death, because I find that interesting.
What is considered death?
Well, because people always talk about if it has a heartbeat, it's alive, but that's not true. You can be alive without a heartbeat. No. Often.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Make a note of that.
Okay, so we need to do a podcast about time of death. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're kind of running out of time. So I wanted to one thing I wanted to bring up is, hey, Charlene, you're late. You're actually coming in at the end of this. And I was actually just about to plug you, actually. Charlene runs Paranormal Hauntings magazine, and she has her own group over in the UK. And I actually saw a sneak peek at the cover for next month's issue, and our name is really big, like front and center on it. So I'm actually pretty stoked about that because I can't actually remember what article I sent her for next issue off the top of my head. But yeah, they featured us in the last issue, and they will be featuring us in the July issue that's coming out. And then I promised Ghost House Paranormal that I would mention them in the podcast. I wanted to give, we just kind of joined their group, doing some social stuff online, kind of helping them out. They're a group based out in New Jersey. I want to say thanks to them. And then Matt, who's been heckling me the entire episode so far, he runs Paranormal Investigation Equipment, or PIE, for lack of a better name. He's based out of Arizona, New Mexico, somewhere in there, I believe.
He said Arizona.
Arizona? Okay. Anyway, he makes paranormal investigation equipment, particularly like diodes.
Is that the one we use?
Yeah. And actually, I need to throw a shout out to him because he's actually sending us an upgrade on that to try out. He's sending us another diode, and then he's also sending us a 2-channel mixer to check out. And we're going to actually be able to plug in the diode alongside a microphone.
Oh, that'll be cool.
At the same time.
Okay.
And the other thing I want to do is I want to put 2 diodes through there and run them in 2 separate spots at the same time.
Okay.
So we'll be able to do a lot of different things. I really like using the diodes. Like I said, we don't get a lot of stuff back from it.
Well, the other thing we do with that, the diode, as opposed to the EVP I carry around, is we leave it in one place as opposed to carrying it around. So maybe it's because we're not leaving it in the best location.
Well, now that we have 2, one thing we can do is we can leave one in a hot spot, and then we can actually carry the other one around with us.
I'm gonna need a vest with Velcro to stick all these things to me at the end of this.
Why don't you just use Ghost Jizz? Because I hear it's really
back to the Ghost Jizz.
I hear it's really sticky.
You did say it was just on the tip of your tongue.
That's disgusting.
That's the phrase you said. I'm just repeating you.
Right. Okay. So if anybody's got any questions or comments about stone tape theory, Ghost Jizz, or you got stories you want to tell us, or you're interested in actually being like a just the tip, or you want to be a guest on the show so we can interview you, just hit us up in an email, visit the website there. Yeah, www.ntparanormal.com. You can call Sarah Hatfield directly on her home line.
No, we don't do
at
that.
826.
Sarah doesn't pick up the phone. We text Sarah.
Okay. So that's pretty much all we got. I don't really see. Okay, let's see what question.
Oh, she just had an interesting. When we do the near death, the NDE thing, near death experiences are cool when it comes to brain death.
Okay, so I mean, we can kind of knock those out in 2 different episodes. So that's a good idea. I had a poll up on one of the things, and it's crazy because now that I've been on the Paranormal Hauntings website for like a few months now, I've been putting a poll up there and a poll up here about like, hey, what should our next episode be? The response from overseas is so different than the response I get here. Like they're always opposite. When I did the Bigfoot episode, like no one here gave a crap. Like I got like 2 votes for Bigfoot. Over there, I got like 40 votes. Like, you got to do Bigfoot because they don't have Bigfoot there.
Oh, we just have to go in the backyard. Oh, wait, that's Chupacabra. We live in Texas.
We should do one on the Chupacabra.
That's not a thing.
It's a thing.
It's not a thing.
Oh, we need to do a debate.
It's a coyote with the mange.
I don't know. So check us out at www.ntparanormal.com. You can email us at ntparanormal@gmail.com. Throw up any comments or questions you got about stone tape theory, and I can answer them more in depth. I kind of rambled my way halfway through this because, Sarah had to go stick her head in the toilet at the beginning, and it totally threw me off my game.
Next time I'll just throw up on you for real.
It would probably be the best episode ever if you just yacked on me.
Probably.
Okay.
Whatever makes you shut up.
All right. Well, everybody have a good night. Have a good weekend. Don't drink too much. Be safe. And if you go ghost hunting, don't piss them off and take them home with you.
Or do and then call us.
Yeah, or do it and then call us to come clean up all that ghost jizz. All right. Peace out. Three comments. I have no idea how many views we got.
You literally said it's right on the tip of my tongue.
I know. I thought it was funny.
I think it's gross. Now I know what you do in your free time.
I just threw it up there for you to bat it down.
And I did.